No matter the game, there comes a point when all the players need to show their cards. I love that moment. But first...
Witchers were made to kill monsters. There might be different schools, different methods, different combat styles, but the core of the matter is the same. If the pay is good enough, you get to work. They aren't heroes, they are professionals. Yet the one they call Geralt of Rivia seems to always find himself on the center of the most important and crucial events of his time, as if by destiny, and eventually having a hand in changing the world around him. But what if I tell you there was another, a witcher responsible for changing the world's political landscape forever, whose actions were the catalyst for wars, massacres, and persecutions? And after all of that, opposite to the legendary White Wolf, who is well renowned all over the world, this witcher, as the rest of his brethren, was destined to fall into obscurity, to be used, discarded, and persecuted by the powerful. So join me as we explore the tragic tale of Letho of Gulet, the KINGSLAYER. But before we begin, be welcome, this is the Roll Crow, and on this channel we explore the life of my favorite characters from my favorite RPGs. If this sounds interesting to you at all, please consider subscribing, and of course, thank you for watching. The first time we encounter and witness this cunning mountain of a man in action is in the second game of the Witcher trilogy, Assassin of Kings, where he acts as the opposite force to us playing as Geralt of Rivia. And after beating the whole game, my head was full of questions. Who is Letho? What does he represent on this story and the Witcher universe at large? What potions do I need to take to get that physique?
Damn, boy, he's thick!
And is he evil? Is he a villain? I mean, he does a fantastic job in The Witcher 2 as the main antagonist, probably the best in the series. And yet, I just don't know how to classify him. I never got a sense of evil from him, his motivations, the forces behind him, and overall his incredibly cool personality makes you just like the guy. Yet, I'll argue that he's responsible for so much more death and destruction than people realize. And was all of that morally justifiable under the right circumstances? Man, so many questions. Alright, let's calm down and look at Letho's history from the beginning and see if we can find some answers. As any other Witcher, discovering the true origins of Letho of Gulet is nearly impossible. We know that even the name they are known for is chosen by them during their training, so their story begins at whichever school they were unlucky enough to be brought upon. And I say unlucky because there is not a worse fate for a child than to partake in the brutal training required to become a professional monster slayer. However, he was lucky or strong enough to survive the ordeal, including the infamous Trial of the Grasses. It is possible for an individual to have different reactions to these substances. For Geralt of Rivia, it was the side effect of his hair going completely white, so we can surmise that the incredible size of Letho might have been a side effect of his body reacting to these chemicals. Regardless, he survived and was able to continue his training in the School of the Viper. There is very little information on the specific origins of each school. However, we know that the School of the Viper was founded by a witcher known as Ivar Evil Eye, with the sole purpose of obtaining as much information and learn the truth about the phenomenon known as the Wild Hunt, the Phantom Riders, the omen of war, and to prepare young witchers for this task. He will submit them to specifically cruel methods to transform them into cold-blooded killers. One such method was to give a pet to the young trainees that they will care for during their training and bond with. Their last test will be to take that same pet and kill it, removing any sort of conscience from the youngster, and this will be necessary because the Vipers wouldn't take contracts only on monsters, but on humans as well. As you can see, that prejudice that exists for witchers in this universe, as bad as it is, it usually comes from some place of truth. So Letho was able to overcome his brutal training and become a fully fleshed witcher. And honestly, after such a cruel upbringing, I don't think anybody would have been surprised if he turned out to be an unfeeling, evil monster. However, the end of his training will not mean the end of his ordeal. He first lost his childhood and now he was about to lose his home. The castle that the Viper Witchers called home was Gortur Gaeft, or the Viper Keep. We don't know how much time Letho spent on these walls, since we cannot determine his age for sure. What we do know is that their keep was located somewhere on the Tirtoshare Mountains, in Nilfgaard. And if the Nilfgaardians value something in this world, it's order. Magic is chaos. and creatures like sorcerers and witchers are a threat to the civilized society of the Empire. The only way for them to survive is to be under the boot of the Emperor and to help him accomplish his goals. So when the current Emperor at the time, the man known to Northern history as simply the Usurper, learned about a guild of hired assassins without morals, he demanded that the Witchers surrender their keep and submitted to work only for him and the glory of the Empire. The monster hunters refused, however. It doesn't matter how good of a fighter you are, even if you have been training to kill your whole life. In war, numbers and tactics are everything. So when the Usurper found the hidden Viper Keep, it was just a matter of time for him to take it with the whole strength of the Nilfgaardian army. The Witchers had no chance. They were massacred. We don't know how many perished that day. However, we know that at least 5 survived. 2 unknown Witchers, Serit and Ox, and of course, Letho of Gulet. And for extra measure, the Emperor decreed that no Witcher will be allowed to enter any major city. They were basically fugitives of the law, so with no place for them to call home anymore, and being labeled as outlaws on the Empire, they will have to turn their sight north in order to survive. And after years in the path, Letho will cross the path of another Witcher, but not just any Witcher, but the legendary White Wolf himself. While he was on the path, Letho will come face to face with a Slizzard. We don't know if he took a contract for it, or just had bad luck, but eventually during the fight, the Slizzard will slam his tail on Letho. He tried to parry it. Foolish mistake. The Slizzard tail went through his defense and shattered his chest. He would have surely died if not for the lucky intervention of Geralt of Rivia. The Viper Witcher eventually recovered, and how lucky for Geralt he would, because the White Wolf was in pursuit of the Wild Hunt, the Phantom Riders, took his lover Yennefer of Vengerberg hostage, and it turns out he just saved a Witcher from the only school in the world that specializes on gathering knowledge about the hunt. It seems the wolf always finds a way to land on his feet, as if by destiny. The Witchers will reunite with the other comrades from the School of the Viper, Serit and Ox, and make way to the Hangman's Tree. According to Letho, in this place, the Wild Hunt will stop their incursion to select which captives they will take to their world as slaves. Yennefer of Vengerberg, sure to be among them. On their way to the tree, the Witchers will bond with Geralt, making fun of his stiff and clunky, yet somehow very effective style of combat, while they will be impressed at the just and noble way in which the White Wolf carried himself. They eventually made it to the Hangman's Tree, and it turned out that Letho was correct. They encountered the hunt with their captives, Yennefer included. The monster slayers began to demonstrate that the Phantom Riders can in fact lead. One by one, the riders of the hunt fell to the Witcher's blades. It seems that such brutal training has its merits after all. However, the same problem that the Vipers had against the Nilfgaardians would arise. They were simply too few. 4 against an entire raiding party, the monster hunters will surrender, and Geralt will make an exchange with the king of the Wild Hunt, his soul for that of his loved one, Yennefer. The king will agree without hesitation. However, before leaving, he would erase Yennefer's memory. So now the Viper Witchers were left with a very powerful and feverish sorceress, suffering from amnesia, while they were still in the heart of the Empire, where any false move could mean their death. Letho had already paid his debt to Geralt by guiding him to the Wild Hunt. He had no obligation to take care of Yennefer, yet they decided to take care of the sorceress, bringing her back to health, even though she did not make things easy for them. Yennefer was constantly getting into trouble. She tried to seduce Ox, and was constantly trying to create a wedge between them. Even through all of this, they stood by her. As you can see, humanity never left these mutated killers. We can find no trace of a villain on Letho or his comrades. Eventually their luck will run out, however, and the party will be captured by the secret Nilfgaardian police. But instead of the gallows, the Witchers will be interrogated by the head of the secret police, Batier de Rideau, and Letho will be awarded with an audience with the Emperor of Nilfgaard himself, the white flame dancing on the graves of his foes, Emir van Embrace. He will present Letho an offer he could not refuse. The Emperor will give Letho a special mission to go to the northern kingdoms and breed chaos, kill as many rulers as he could, and lay the blame on the Lodge of Sorcerers. All of this to prepare the north for the third and hopefully for Emir the last Nilfgaardian invasion. In exchange, the Emperor will restore and recognize the School of the Viper as legitimate. Finally, after a lifetime of suffering and living as an outlaw, Letho will have a chance to make a home for him and his brethren, and for this, he will light the whole world on fire. First, he will travel north and find the sorceress Sheila de Tanserville. She was reluctant to trust him at first, however, slowly but surely, Letho will earn her trust by working for her. He will play the role of the big dumb henchman.
I stayed close to Sheila, killed a few beasts for her, and whined about how unhappy I was, how unfair the world was. So much, in fact, that I actually got her gander up a few times.
His aim was to kill the king of Kovir, Esterat Tyson, and put the blame on Sheila. Yet none of this will ever come to fruition, because Sheila herself, with the backing of the Lodge of Sorceresses, will order Letho to assassinate the king of Erdun, Demavend III, with the goal of replacing him for a more stable and malleable king. Believing she had the perfect pawn, a big, dumb, well-trained brute, Sheila will provide Letho with all the resources and information necessary to complete his mission. Letho could not have asked for a better hand. He had all the resources to kill his first king and all the information to blame the sorceress with. So now it was time to work, and Letho will finally become the Kingslayer. After killing Demavend, Letho will try to hide his tracks, yet he was so close to getting caught. It turns out that getting away with Regicide is not as easy as he thought, but it will be Sheila who will present the perfect escape for the Witcher. Look for the Scoia'tael leader, Jorveth, and ask him for refuge. This move will not only give Letho protection from his pursuers, but also hide him from the Lodge of Sorceresses. So just like that, Letho will play Sheila again for a fool.
She helped me quite a bit. Through naivety and pride. I would not have gotten far without her.
Now it was time to earn the trust of the Elven guerrilla group and use them for his next assassination. He will present Jorveth with the head of King Demavend and play to the elf hatred of humans and their kings to earn his trust. The woodland fox will agree to help him plan his next killing. This time the target was King Foltest of Temeria. The plan was more convoluted this time though, yet it was the best option they had, knowing that King Foltest was fighting an insurrection against the Lavalettes, who held his bastard children. Letho and Jorveth will bank on the king eventually sieging the castle and taking back his children, and when that happened, the Lavalettes brought the children to the monastery, where they will be safe. So Letho infiltrated the castle as a monk, knowing that the king eventually will go to the temple in search of his bastards. And all went according to plan, except that the king was under the protection of an old friend, Geralt of Rivia. Luckily for Letho, the wolf was suffering from amnesia, courtesy of the wild hunt, so he failed to recognize his old brother off the path. The Viper will wait for Geralt to lower his guard, and when Foltest was away from him, Letho approached behind him and slit his throat. He then escaped the castle with the help of the Scoia'tael, and the blame of the murder will go on Geralt, yet another Kingslayer, and his tracks covered. Here we learn that nothing will stand on his way in order to accomplish his mission and restore the School of the Viper to its former glory, even framing and convicting an old friend for regicide, which probably will mean a long and painful death for him. Regardless, Letho will go into hiding again with the Scoia'tael, yet he realized that Jorveth will not be as easy to manipulate as Sheila de Tanserville. The woodland fox was simply too observant, and now he had the best tracker in the north on his tail. He had to act quickly, so he offered a deal to Kiaran, Jorveth's second-in-command, to betray Jorveth and get control of his Scoia'tael unit. The elf will refuse, however, so in order to cover his tracks, Letho, Serit, and Ox massacred Kiaran's whole Scoia'tael unit. They didn't finish off Kiaran himself though, and this mistake will let Geralt find him by getting in contact with Jorveth and informing him of Leto's betrayal. Finally, the wolf was able to catch up with the Viper. Geralt will try to learn Leto's plan, yet their conversation was interrupted by a Scoia'tael ambush, and the Witchers will end up fighting one another. It was a close and intense match. However, in the end, the Viper will triumph over the Wolf. This feat alone proves to us that Letho of Gulet is one of the strongest fighters in the world. He could have got rid of the only person on his trail right there. Yet, he decided to spare Geralt's life, which shows us that despite all that has happened, he still feels a sense of camaraderie to the Witcher. Yet, he decided to kidnap his lover, the sorceress Triss Merigold, and force her to teleport him to Upper Earth, where he will attempt his next assassination. This time the target was Henselt, the king of Kedwen, who was invading the lands of Upper Earth after King Demavend III's death. Now here is where the choices you make on The Witcher 2 affect Leto's story a bit. Regardless of what you do, canonically, the assassination attempt on King Henselt fails. Yet, it's when you choose to side with Vernon Roach and progress the story on his side where the saddest and most impactful moment to the story happens. Serrit and Ox will infiltrate the king's camp and try to murder him. They will be stopped by the White Wolf, who was able to kill Ox and heavily wound Serrit, who will later perish at the hand of Sheila the Tanserville. And I say it's sad because Geralt is forced to kill two people that risk their lives in order to help him rescue and take care of his lover Yennefer, two Witchers that Geralt considered his friends before losing his memory.
We didn't want to leave you.
What are you talking about?
Nearly made it. Just think. The Wild Hunt. We could have freed the world of the omen of war.
Regardless, Letho was nowhere to be found. He already was on his way to Loch Muin. On Loch Muin, there will be a meeting with the most important political players in the Northern Kingdoms, the remaining monarchs, war generals, important noblemen, the conclave of mages, and some sorceresses, with the goal to assess and discuss the current chaotic state of the Northern Kingdoms and find a solution to these issues. In reality, it was a contest to see what faction had the most power and gain even more control over the north. Here, Letho and Shillard, the ambassador of Nilfgaard in the north, would bring the last stage of the Emperor's plan to fruition. They staged an assassination attempt where Letho was captured trying to kill the ambassador. Under interrogation, he revealed that he was indeed the man responsible for the murders of King Foltest and King Demavend, and he did all of this at the behest of the Lodge of Sorcerers, covering Nilfgaard's involvement on the plot and turning the northern rulers against the mages. They will be labeled as traitors. King Radovid of Redania will take this as an excuse to finally eradicate the Lodge of Sorcerers and Mages from the political sphere. The infamous massacre of Loch Muin will ensue, and it's after all of this happens that Geralt finally catches up with Letho, where he finally reveals his plan on behalf of the Emperor to cause as much chaos in the north as possible and refresh the wolf's memory about their history together and the fate of his lover, Yennefer. And after hearing his piece, you get to decide if the Viper deserves to die or just simply walk away. Okay, so after learning Leto's full story and his role on the Witcher universe, I believe we are ready to tackle the unending questions that I asked myself about him and try to look for some answers. And while I wasn't able to find a way to get those massive biceps, I believe I found some clarity on the other things that I was wondering about. First, I want to talk about why I believe Letho is such a good antagonist. In The Witcher 2, you, that being Geralt, are presented with the question of why is a Witcher killing kings? Yet you also wonder on how this Witcher seems to know so much about your past. So regardless of the way you roleplay Assassin of Kings, catching Letho is always a present motivation for you to keep progressing the story, regardless of the reason on why you do it, and the Viper seems to be always a step too far from you. Every time you think you're catching up, he finds the way to outsmart you. When you come face to face with him, he finds the way to defeat you. He kidnaps your lover Triss, and you're unable to stop him. He is overall a stronger and smarter version of yourself, and by the end, when you finally catch up to him, because he waits for you by the way, you realize the fact that he actually won. He accomplished his mission. He played everybody for a fool.
Letho cheated all of us. We were deceived by his dull face and sluggish stare.
He murdered two kings and successfully blamed the sorceress for it. He lit the northern kingdoms on fire and prepared the grounds for the Nilfgaardian invasion, and you were unable to stop him. So at the end, it doesn't matter if you kill him or let him go. The job's done. You lost.
You lose! Good day, sir!
So what about villainy? Is he evil? And how did his actions change the world so much? After all, we learned that he did all of this with the motivation to provide a new home for his Viper Witcher brothers. And he did so at the command of the Emperor. So it's not like he had the choice to just refuse, right? It was doing his bidding or death most likely. And you might ask, Roll Crew, didn't he just harm like political players, kings, guerrilla fighters, soldiers and sorcerers? They are all schemers anyway, so what's the big deal? Yet, it's in the ramification of those actions where the real tragedy is presented. By killing those kings, he directly opened the doors to the Nilfgaardian invasion. So when you play The Witcher 3 and walk around Velen and see the unending destruction, the people hunged, the hungry peasants, the war orphans, the countless corpses, all of that is a result of Letho's actions. When you travel to Novigrad and see countless mages and alchemists persecuted, impaled or burned alive at the stake for the sole crime of showing just a bit of interest on the arcane, all of that started because of Letho. There are 3 different resolutions to the war between Nilfgaard and the Northern Kingdoms in The Witcher 3. Either the Empire completely takes over the north, or the Northern Kingdoms are assimilated by either Radovid or Dijkstra under the Redanian banner. Either way, it means the end of independent monarchies on the continent. So if we take into consideration that this war was only possible because of what Letho did, I think I can confidently say that yeah, he is indirectly responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths, countless suffering, and the complete change of the political landscape in the Witcher world. And yet, I can't call Letho a villain. He is responsible for so much evil, true, but he's also a victim of circumstance. After his brutal childhood, he spent all of his life as a fugitive, yet he never lost his humanity, helping his Witcher brethren every time he could, facing the wild hunt with Geralt, taking care of his lover Yennefer, and rescuing his other lover, Triss Merigold, from the Nilfgaardians if you fail to save her by the end of The Witcher 2. And when his back was against the wall, the most powerful man in the world gave him the option to either do his bidding and restore the Skull of the Viper, his home, to its former glory, or refuse and probably die. And after succeeding on his task, after outsmarting and using every single pawn to complete his mission, after single-handedly changing the history of the whole world, his reward will be either death or exile. Letho knew too much. He had to go. Emhyr will put a bounty on Letho, and that is where we found him, when we encountered him on The Witcher 3, provided we did not kill him at the end of Witcher 2, hiding from bounty hunters and assassins, still outsmarting everyone, yet still an outlaw. Back to how he was before doing the Emperor's bidding, except this time he was alone. In his pursuit of making a home for himself and the Viper Witchers, he will destroy the Northern Kingdoms from the inside. The Witcher trained to fight the Wild Hunt, the Omen of War, became the Omen of War for one of the biggest and deadliest conflicts in the continent's history, and in the process, he lost his 2 brothers, Serrit and Ox. So that is the story of Letho of Gulet, not a villain, but a tragic antagonist. Thanks so much for watching till the end, my friends. What are your thoughts on Letho? Do you consider him evil in any way? Did you like him as an antagonist? Let me know in the comments. Regardless of that though, this has been the Roll Crow, and I do hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and good luck on the path.